A big thank you to Negative Lab for sponsoring today's video. Visit negativelab.co and get 10% off your first order using the code DAVE. What's up, guys, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Dave and I'm a photographer and videographer from the Bay Area of California. I'm currently sitting in beautiful Yellowstone National Park. The weather has been insane so far, so we're gonna try to have some fun. I'm gonna talk you guys through some of the places that I'm shooting. I'm gonna show you guys the best places to find wildlife. I'm gonna give you some behind the scenes look at things that we got. So all that to say, let's go explore Yellowstone and have some fun. So let's talk about Yellowstone National Park. First, it was America's first national park in 1872. That means our government has been protecting this land for over 150 years. Very few places in America have been untouched like the 2.2 million acres of Yellowstone. It's truly an incredible place to experience. So let's talk about the cameras that I brought with me. I brought my main camera that I shoot with, which is the Leica M11. I brought my Leica M6 as well and loaded it up with Portra 400 basically the entire time we were there. I brought my Hasselblad 500 CM loaded up with plenty of rolls of Ektachrome 100 slide film, which was my greatest photography mistake I have made in years. Apparently you need a level of skill to shoot that film that I do not have. I brought my Sony kit, my A7R5, my A7S3. Sony loaned me the 400 2.8, which was absolutely amazing. Like, I totally understand now why this is a $12,000 lens. Now let's take a few minutes and talk about photography in Yellowstone. If you're planning to go there for the purpose of taking photos, or maybe you're going there because you want to experience the park and you're bringing some serious camera equipment, or honestly, even just your phone, I'm going to share some things that I have learned over many years of taking photos in Yellowstone that might help you leave the park and leave your experience with your best work. Your wide lenses are likely too wide. 50mm is the new 28mm in Yellowstone. Landscapes there are huge. They are sprawling. Things are really far away. Nearly every wide shot that I've taken in Yellowstone has been taken around 50mm. If you go there with 24 or even lower than that, everything is going to be so tiny, you're probably going to be really unhappy with your photos. If you're there shooting with your iPhone, just use the 2 or the 3 and use that for everything. The second thing about photography in Yellowstone is understanding that the park is incredibly diverse geographically, and it's also really spread out. Like, things can be really far apart from each other. But the point I'm making here is that because the park is so large and so incredibly diverse, a little pre-planning about what every part of the park is going to be like or look like, or what you might find in different parts of the park, can help you plan your photography journey around Yellowstone. And not get stuck in a situation where you want to shoot this one thing in the morning and this other thing in the afternoon and they happen to be 70 miles apart. The third thing is regarding golden hour photography inside the park. Now, golden hour can be tricky if you are not staying in a part of the park that you want to shoot golden hour in. It really isn't advised to drive in the dark around Yellowstone because there are animals that are the size of cars that are using the roads in Yellowstone to move around. And in the dark, those animals don't have headlights and you might not know they are there until it is too late and you slam into a bison at 70 miles an hour. So if you're planning to do some golden hour photography, and this would be especially true of sunrise as well as after sunset, you want to stay in a part of the park that you want to do that golden hour photography in. And the fourth thing is that since the park is so incredibly huge, consider hiring a local guide to take you to the places where you want to photograph. I mean, that's what we just did for the very first time, and it was an incredible experience. Shout out to Lisa at Touring Wonderland for giving us this awesome experience. We did in a half day with Lisa what would have taken me all week to find around the park. A local guide is going to know the park well. They know where all the activity is for the animals that you might want to go photograph. And while they can't make the animals show up or come out, they're going to know way more than you about how to find everything you're looking for. We went in with a list of things I wanted to photograph, and we left seeing literally everything on the list. And we did it in half of a day because she knew exactly where to go. Hire a local. I've got a link to Touring Wonderland, Lisa, who we hired. She was amazing. So hit her up if you're going to the park. Now that we've covered a handful of tips, let's talk about some locations you can go to find some great subjects. I'm going to be talking about 3 things: landscapes, wildlife, and architecture. Now, real quick, if this is your first time here, my name is Dave. I'm a photographer and videographer from the Bay Area of California. I post 2 videos every week unless something goes horribly wrong, so be sure to like this video and subscribe. So on landscapes, there is no shortage of incredible landscapes in Yellowstone. I'm going to show you 5 of my favorites. Some of these may be well known, some not as well known, and I'll show you how I captured these spots. First up on the list is Lamar Valley. And I'm going to show you on a map where these things are. I'm using this old map. This is from 1966. I guess that would be considered an antique map of Yellowstone, but because the park has been there since the late 1800s, not much has changed. Let's start by establishing that Yellowstone is kind of like a figure 8. This first spot I'm going to talk about is one of my favorite places to shoot in the park, Lamar Valley. So if you're thinking in terms of the figure 8, Lamar Valley is on the northeast side of the park. You enter Lamar Valley right here at Tower Junction, and then you head into this valley here. I think Lamar Valley might be my favorite landscapes in the park. It's open year-round, so you can access it in the wintertime without any problems. You can also easily shoot in Lamar Valley during golden hour because it's not very far from Mammoth Hot Springs, which has a hotel and cabins, or you could stay right outside of Mammoth Hot Springs in Gardner, Montana very easily. Additionally, in Lamar Valley, there's this little road here, a little gravel road called Slough Creek, and that road will take you down to a campsite, but on the way down there, and it's not incredibly far, but you will go into some incredible scenic areas that you can kind of be below some of the mountain and hills, and if you have a longer lens, you can get some really beautiful compression there. And there's also wildlife typically down there. It's a really great spot for photography, and it's off of the main road, and so you don't necessarily see really large crowds down there, even on the busier days of the park. So Lamar Valley, Slough Creek, that area has the best landscape opportunities, for me at least. Next up would be Hayden Valley. Hayden Valley is right here below Canyon Village. It's kind of in the central part of the park. It's going to take you from Fishing Bridge to Canyon on this road here. And this part of Yellowstone is like the proper part of Yellowstone that is only open for 3 seasons. The only part that is open in the wintertime to vehicles is Lamar Valley. Hayden Valley has a beautiful river that runs through it. Most of the viewpoints are going to be fairly high up, and you're going to get these really long rolling views. And then if you look on the other side, it's a little more flat and hilly, but you still have these like really incredible views, and they're kind of broken up by these little tree groves. The river will oftentimes get some early morning fog, and if you are staying in the canyon part of Yellowstone, it's super easy to just go down to Hayden Valley in the early morning when the fog is over the river and rolling over the landscapes and get these really beautiful river shots and this foggy sunrise. Hayden Valley is really incredible. It's not Lamar Valley, but it's still really beautiful. This third location is called the Artist Paint Pots, and it's in between Madison Junction and Norris on this little stretch of road here. You're going to come to the paint pot turnoff, and you'll go to the trailhead and park your car. If you were to hike the trail, the first thing you're going to see is this massive grove of dead trees. And because of the paint pots and the geyser activity in the area, there's always some steam in the air, and that steam creates this really cool effect for all the light, whether it's early morning light or even midday light. The whole area looks really cool. As you hike the trail, there's some really great views of the geyser activity, and you'll see those very much like textured views, and they kind of roll. It's not like just a flat surface with geysers. You get these really interesting landscapes. It's a mix of this geyser activity with trees, with stone, with rock, with mud. It's really an interesting place to go get some landscapes. Additionally, if you exit the parking lot on foot and walk back towards the road entrance where you turned in, and it's only a couple of minutes walk, you're going to come to this area where the river comes up against the road, and there's a beautiful spot there that I photograph every time that I'm there. But this one particular time, I was there in the early morning, and there was this gold orange light hitting the trees with some steam in the air. I mean, it was really, really beautiful. All around that area are just these open meadows and rolling mountains and a tree line. Sometimes there's wildlife there as well, but it's just a beautiful spot for landscapes. This next spot, the fourth one, is very well known. It is the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone. On the map, this is right here. You see Canyon Village. It's on the east side of the park, very central to the park. So if you're moving around Yellowstone, you're likely going to come through this area. If you've had a busy day out, you don't have to really work hard for this view. You can literally drive in and park your car just a few feet from one of 3 overlooks where you can get a great view of the falls. You can also stay in Canyon at a cabin or the hotel and just hike over to this in just a few minutes, which we did a few years ago, and that hike was beautiful. We were able to be there for golden hour, and I got some just incredibly beautiful shots of the falls in this area. But I've also shot it in midday on my film cameras, and it always looks good. It never disappoints. The 5th place I like to shoot for landscapes is Mammoth Hot Springs, but it's not because there are these big sprawling landscapes. It's actually not that big of an area, but it's really interesting for textures. Nature is weird and makes a lot of weird things, and you really could see that in Mammoth Hot Springs. I'll also add as a bonus Grand Prismatic Spring as well. There, of course, is a trail you can take and do an overlook of Grand Prismatic Spring, but if you do the trail onto the spring itself, you get to see a lot of really interesting textures. And whether you're in Mammoth or you're in Grand Prismatic Springs, there's something really fun and interesting about taking photos of these really unique textures that you're only gonna find really in Yellowstone. So I'd really encourage you to check out those locations for landscapes. And the good news is that you're gonna see some overlap as we talk about wildlife. Because Yellowstone is kind of like a wild zoo. There are animals everywhere. However, I've seen some really stupid shit because tourists seem to think that these animals are domesticated. Just last month, we were driving between Norris and Mammoth Hot Springs, and we passed a mother grizzly and her 3 cubs who had just come out of the woods and were walking alongside of the road. We went about 100 yards past the bears and pulled over, and at that point, I got out my Sony with the 400 2.8, and I went right beside the car and took some photos looking back at nearly a football field length away from me at these bears. While I'm doing that, several cars stop literally beside the mother grizzly and her 3 cubs, and they get out of their car and they begin to get out their phones, and they're walking up and over to the bears with their phones out to take videos and photos like you're at somebody's house and you're gonna go interact with their dog. Have these people not seen The Revenant? Wildlife should be aware of you in the park because that's for your own safety that they know you are there. But you should be staying at the recommended distance away from those animals. For the bears and wolves and some of the more vicious animals, it's recommended you stay at least 100 yards away. For bison and some of the other less vicious animals that can still mess you up, it's recommended that you stay at least 25 yards away. You don't want to be that photographer who's trying to see how close they can get to a wild animal. That's just dumb. So with all of that said, let's talk about some of the best places in the park to see wildlife. And the first place we're going to return to is, of course, Lamar Valley. In Lamar Valley, there are bison everywhere. All year long, there are bison in Lamar Valley. If that is your dream, to take photos of bison, just go to Lamar Valley. There are other places too, but Lamar Valley is guaranteed you are going to see bison. But bison aren't the only things in this part of the park. In my many trips to this area, I have seen wolves, I have seen moose, I have seen coyotes, I have seen antelope, I have seen foxes, I have seen elk, I've even seen river otters. The key to getting really great photos of wildlife is to simply be prepared for the kind of photos you want to get. If you want those close-up portraits of animals, you're going to need to bring some type of long lens. Now, I've been there before with a 1:400, this time obviously with the 400 2.8. Those types of lenses allow me to get close up to the wildlife that are there. But you can also get great wide shots of wildlife too that are very compelling images. One of my all-time favorite photos I've ever taken of wildlife was taken with a 135, but the photo is actually very wide because he was so far away from me. Now, my wife got a little video clip of this bison as it was running across the meadow and I was shooting with my 135, but I love everything about this photo and I would consider it pretty wide even though it's a 135. Another one of my favorite shots I took on my Rolleiflex film camera back when I had that camera. I really miss it. It had the equivalent of about a 50 millimeter on it. And I got this bison like stampede going down from the road as they were running into the meadow. And I love that shot. Not all wildlife photography has to be right up close, and in Lamar Valley, you can find so many great scenes of wildlife from a distance with long lenses and with lenses down to maybe 50 millimeters and get just incredible photos. Another spot that I want to share with you is right by Lamar Valley, but rather than turning into Lamar Valley at Tower Junction, you just continue on the main road and you go past the Roosevelt Corrals and you go right around that Rainy Lake area, which is only like a mile past the corrals, which is like right past Tower Junction. This area is a pretty known black bear spot, and we went back several times in our time there and we saw black bears basically every single time. And we even saw a mother black bear with her little cubs, and the cubs were up hiding and playing in the trees and then running around. It was just like one of the most magical and cutest experiences I've ever had. And that was all just right there. It wasn't quite in Lamar Valley, just on the main road. That stretch of road is mostly like people passing through. So if you just pull off and look around, you might find something great to take photos of. Okay, let's revisit Hayden Valley next, which again, remember it's down here, right below Canyon, in between Fishing Bridge and Canyon. This whole road here is Hayden Valley. Now, in my opinion, Hayden Valley can be pretty tough for wildlife. Most of the animals in Hayden Valley are very far away. Now, in Lamar Valley, they're far away. In Hayden Valley, they can be very far. Even the bison can look like little dots on the hillsides. Just recently, while we were there, I put that 400 2.8 on my camera and I was holding it up and just scanning the horizon, looking to see if I could see any animals, when I saw a little gray dot moving. And as you're looking at this photo, that gray dot is really small. And this is at 400 millimeters, but that was a gray wolf, but it's so incredibly far away. There really was no hope in getting any photos of this guy. Now that said, in a prior trip to Yellowstone, I was driving through Hayden Valley on an afternoon. A wolf pack crossed the road right in front of me. I just pulled over, gave them the road, and watched them as they all worked their way from one side of the road to the other. A beautiful and incredible experience. And I took some photos with the 1-400 from the car while this was happening. Absolutely amazing. So that was also in Hayden Valley. So I say it can be tough, but can also be kind of hit or miss. I also recently saw a coyote there just by himself wandering around in the morning. Got some photos of that guy as well. So you can definitely find wildlife in Hayden Valley. They are there, and it's a very well-known wildlife location. But if you're looking for the guarantee, the sure thing, head to Lamar Valley. Now, there is a road called Fountain Flat Drive, and where it's at is south of Madison, but not quite to Old Faithful. It's closer to Madison. It's just right in this area here. You'll see a turnoff for Fountain Flat Drive. That road is pretty empty most of the time. It's not like a super crowded or popular part of the park, but there's typically bison there. There's also a river that's going to curve up there, and one of the cooler things you can typically see there if you're waiting around and watching for it is bison crossing the river. And that's kind of a spectacle to see as these giant animals into the river walk or paddle across to the other side. It's far enough away from you that you do need a fairly long lens. These were taken at 400 to get that kind of shot. But it's really cool to see it. And like I said, there's typically bison there. Another thing that's pretty neat about that area is this is a bison-like nursery for all of the spring babies. I saw more bison babies on this road with their moms and their little family units all hanging out in the meadow than I saw anywhere else in the park. So if you go in the spring and you go over to this road, probably going to see a bunch of bison babies and maybe some bison crossing the river. And speaking of the bison, let me give a quick shout out to Manfrotto. Manfrotto outfitted me with tripods for this trip. Most importantly, a tripod that I could use to get video of the bison on that 400 millimeter lens. My small little travel tripods would have never gotten the job done. I also used this monopod that Manfrotto sent me with that 400 2.8 because these quick snapping legs made it really easy to lock in, and whether I was shooting high or low and just quickly change that composition, it was a really nice way to move around and get some stability while taking photos of the wildlife with that lens. To learn more about Manfrotto tripods and my relationship with them, hit that link right below. And again, thank you Manfrotto for hooking me up for this trip. Now we've talked about landscapes, we've talked about wildlife, now let's talk about some architecture for photography in Yellowstone. Now I doubt people travel the world to go to Yellowstone to see the architecture, but there is some really cool stuff there to see. And if you're there already for the wildlife or the landscapes, grab some photos of the buildings as well. I just have two spots that I think are worth checking out. The first is at Old Faithful. Now, Old Faithful has not made my list yet. Where it's at in the park is down here in the southwest section. There's an entire community, the Old Faithful Village. Of course, you've got the geyser and all the geyser activity, but you've also got the lodge. That lodge is really cool to see and experience. You can walk in, you can walk around the different levels of the lodge. If you're there during midday, you can grab photos of these high contrast scenes where light might be blasting through the window, but with all the dark wood and shadows everywhere, you just get these really cool scenes. The wood, the railings, the furniture, it's just all so historic and so interesting that it definitely makes a photo-worthy spot. Plus, if you're going to watch the geyser erupt, and it's called Old Faithful for a reason because they can basically predict within a 20-minute window when it's going to erupt, you can wait that out just by walking around the lodge, and when you're within 10 or 15 minutes of the eruption, just walk down and watch it erupt. So you definitely have to take some photos at the Old Faithful Lodge. The other location is in Mammoth Hot Springs. And again, that's in the northwest corner right here. There's an entire village there as well, with these old buildings, and the color palette of these buildings is just absolutely gorgeous. This color palette looks so good on a bright and sunny day, especially if you're shooting film like Portra 400. These film shots you're seeing right now were developed and scanned by Negative Lab. And you can see that it's really just the most perfect film stock for the middle of the day in Mammoth Hot Springs. I also enjoy taking black and white photos in this area too, because the buildings are very nostalgic, and black and white just invokes a sense of nostalgia just in the images alone. So those two locations would really be the only places that for me, I would say are worth photographing architecturally. Now, before we wrap this video up, and I know this video has gotten pretty long, I just want to give a bonus because just 31 miles south of Yellowstone is Grand Teton National Park. And if you have traveled some distance to go to Yellowstone, you have got to add Grand Teton National Park to your list as well. To me, the Tetons are the most beautiful mountain range in the US. You've got these rolling hills and meadows that just out of nowhere meet this massive wall of glacier-carved stone. I mean, it's just something to behold. I'm gonna walk through really quickly a few of my favorite spots to take photos of if you're driving south of Yellowstone down through the Tetons. I'm gonna rapid fire some locations for you that you should stop and take some photos at. The first is Colter Bay. First thing you're gonna hit as you're getting into the Grand Teton area, look, do this. Go to the visitor center, take a right, go to the very end of the road. That spot down there has this like incredible view. I went there to shoot for sunrise, and I was the only person there. You don't wanna miss something like that. So go to Colter Bay, visitor center, take a right, go to the end of the road, just incredible view. The next stop as you're driving is Oxbow Bend. Definitely worth stopping there and taking some photos. But if you keep going past Oxbow Bend, you're gonna get to Elk Flats. And in Elk Flats is typically where the bison herd are, but the difference between Lamar Valley or Hayden Valley is that here the bison herd has a backdrop behind them of these massive mountains. Now, of course, the bison could be pretty far away, but the mountain view is insane just to see those bison in front of it. It's like the most Western thing you can see, and therefore the most Western thing you can get photos of. And if you continue south, just for a few minutes, you're gonna come to a turnoff that'll take you to Cunningham Cabin. This cabin was built in the late 1800s. It's not even a hike to get to it. You can park and just walk over to it. I have been there numerous times in almost every season but winter. And there's like rarely anybody at this cabin, but from this cabin, you get these amazing views of the Tetons. You can walk in the cabin and around the cabin. There's typically elk and wildlife around the cabin. It's an incredible spot to stop and take some photos. Did a portrait session there with my wife, Amanda. Photos turned out amazing. We're the only people there. If you keep going, you're gonna come to Snake River Overlook. That is where Ansel Adams took his like iconic photo of the Grand Tetons. This is one of the best places, I think, in the US, maybe in all of North America, or perhaps even the world, to watch a sunrise. And yeah, that area can be a little crowded with other photographers, but it's worth it. It's just worth every moment of being there. And while you're there, strike up a conversation. The same thing can be said of Schwabacher Landing. It's just past Snake River. If you go down a little further, you're going to get to an area where you turn off, you go down a gravel road, and you drive up to a parking lot that's on the river. And from the river, there are so many vantage points of the Tetons that you can walk along the river and find. Sunrise there is just insane as well. And yeah, it can be crowded, but again, worth it. There's a reason it's crowded. And finally, if you turn back and go back north just a quick minute and then make a right, go down to Mormon Row, you get these old historic barns and buildings. They are mostly slammed with people all the time, but again, just worth it in every single way. There are so many compositions to be had there. You can shoot there in the middle of the day, get beautiful photos. You can do sunrise there. You can do sunset there. I've been there in every season, and I gotta tell you, winter is like the most fun time to go there. I did a video back in January where I was just there. You can watch that video right here. I'll link it above. But what it takes to get out there in the wintertime is actually quite complicated. You have to park, you have to walk quite a bit of a ways through the snow with snowshoes even sometimes. But you get this place kind of to yourself, and it's so beautiful when you have the Tetons in the background and these buildings that are so old all around you. It's a photographer's dream to shoot this area. So if you're in Yellowstone, you're planning to go to Yellowstone, you have to make it a combo and go to Grand Teton as well. And just one other quick recommendation for you, because I know how much we photographers love our coffee. I typically drink espresso every day. I do 4 shots every morning. Don't write any comments about that. My doctor cleared me and said it was okay. But I typically do 2 and 2 shots of espresso every morning. And as someone that consumes a lot of espresso, I know how difficult these sunrises I'm mentioning can be, because the closest coffee shop to you in Yellowstone is Gardner, which is outside of Mammoth on the north. And in the Tetons, it's in Jackson, which is a good 35, 45, maybe even an hour, depending on how far north you go in the Tetons, to get your cup of coffee. So what you might do is kind of what I do. Typically, you just push through that sunrise shoot and just deal with the possible impending headache you're gonna get from not having your espresso. Now I gotta tell you about this thing that I found. This company sent me this for free because I asked for it and I said I would do this, but it's because I wanted it, and I think you guys may want it too. This is a portable espresso machine. That's right, espresso. Look how small this thing is. This is a brand called Outin. This can make 3 to 5 cups of espresso, and that's using Nespresso pods, but you can also grind your own and put it in here. Multiple ways to do it, and that's 3 to 5 with cold water poured into the top. This thing is tiny, it fits in my camera case. I brought a ton of Nespresso pods to use with it, and for what it costs, which is not all that insane, and to be able to make espresso from cold water out on the field, yeah, it's pretty awesome. It's like a no-brainer for a sunrise photographer. This thing even charges by USB-C, so you can charge it up in your car or just with a portable battery pack. This thing has a permanent place in my camera bag when I'm traveling now, because I can have my espresso at sunrise. If this is something you would be interested in learning more about, be sure to check out the link below to Outin. See what they are all about. This thing is just absolutely amazing. I'm blown away by it. All right, if you're planning to travel to Yellowstone or the Tetons for photography, I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you want to see some fuller, more complete galleries from this video, there's a link below that'll take you to my website, and from there you can pick the galleries you want to look at. I have several galleries from both the Grand Tetons and Yellowstone over many types of trips I've taken, so be sure to check those out. Thanks again to Negative Lab for sponsoring today's video. Thanks to Sony for loaning me the lens, to Manfrotto for hooking up the tripods, and for Outin for hooking up the caffeine. And thank you for watching and following along. That's gonna be it for today. I'll see you guys next time.